Hello, I'm Sandra Jungers and I'm back with you this afternoon or maybe it's this morning, but anyway, I'm back with you to talk a little bit more about developmental care, and this time we're going to focus on the musculoskeletal system and how important it is for us as nurses to maintain the musculoskeletal system for our infants. I'm going to give you a few objectives in this lecture here, and the fact that hopefully once we finish this, you're going to be able to discuss the importance of positioning and what the effects are both on short-term and long-term outcomes with our infants if positioning is overlooked or not implemented as soon as we need to in the NICU. And then also we're going to try to understand a little bit more about how developmentally appropriate positioning really is, what impact that it does have on our infants. And then we're going to talk a little bit about getting that microenvironment for the infant that demonstrates a little bit of midline flexion containment. And I think you'll find that this is where you're really doing a lot of work at the bedside and you're really looking to see what is taking place with your infant. Hopefully you'll be gaining some observation skills in order to help you to better assess your infants. And as I said, I've been a nurse for a long time, and I got very interested in developmental care and feel like that it is the one thing that we as clinicians can do at the bedside that does make a significant impact with our infants. So with that being said, we're going to move over and sort of take and look a little bit at that musculoskeletal system. You'll notice in this slide here, very beginning, the embryonic stage for our infant. Notice the fact that we've got a few limb buds here. Notice the fact that we have, where the eyes are, the fact that, we've got, head shape and so forth. And this is the very, very beginning. I mean, look how small and vulnerable our infants are as things start to progress, and the fact they take up very little space in that amniotic sac and within the uterine wall. Notice the distinct contrast in the slide that I just showed you and this slide here where we have the infant in utero. He is much older. The fact, look where his arms are, look where his hands are. Look at how, his head is being braced, his buttocks are being braced, the fact that he's got his knees, pointed north-south, and the fact that he has the ability to do foot bracing. This is sort of kind of what it's all about with our infants, and the fact that they really want to have that physiologically flexed position. They want containment. And all of these have a significant impact on what's going to be happening with our infant and when he gets to the NICU unit and we're taking care of him and his growth and development. All right, let's talk a little bit about the musculoskeletal system and the fact that, do you realize that the musculoskeletal system is actually moldable, and the fact that the shaping of this system actually begins when the infant comes to us in the NICU, and that we can have some real positive input into how that musculoskeletal system develops. It's a process that continues all through the hospital stay with our infant. We have the ability as the caregiver to observe early posture. We have the ability to observe early movement. We can, just really be in tune to what this infant is doing and how he's responding to positions and so forth. Because remember that if we have a negative musculoskeletal development, we will interfere with motor development. And so therefore we want to do everything that we can to enhance that motor development. The other thing is the fact that we want to try to prevent or minimize any of those musculoskeletal issues that our infants may have, because it's one of the more costly items that our parent will have to provide for when our infant goes home. All right, let's look at that early musculoskeletal development. At the 3rd week gestation, which is approximately day 20, we actually start noticing things to form. But I think what's so amazing is by the 4th week, which is day 21, 28, right in that area, the limb buds start to appear. So we start seeing those little arms and little legs to start appearing. And then, of course, we continue on to the fact that we get to 5 to 20 weeks and we've got skeletal muscles that are emerging. And 7 weeks, we've got that early movement that is taking place. And we also actually see a little bit of neck extension during that period of time. And then, of course, by 9 weeks, we got some general movement with the embryo at this particular point in time that, is visible. That 13 to 15 weeks remember, non-nutritive sucking takes place. And so, you know, things are really happening inside the uterus at this particular point in time. The very low birth weight, the low birth weight infant, though, presents us still with a very immature skeletal system. And remember, we said it's one that is moldable. So, you know, we have direct impact on the outcomes of this infant and what we can do in order to enhance the musculoskeletal system. I find, you know, we could have talked about this system too, as long as 6 or 8 hours, you know, and everything, but I do hope that this challenges you to go back and just sort of take a look at that anatomy and physiology book, you know, check one out at the library, but wipe the dust off the one you have at home, but actually go and look, because it is just amazing to refresh yourself as to exactly what is taking place and when it is taking place, so that you know when you get that infant at 23, 24 weeks, 28 weeks, 32 weeks, you really understand exactly where he is with the musculoskeletal system, as well as it would relate to your neurosensory system as well. You know, when we're looking at our very low birth weight or low birth weight infants, we're looking at infants that come to us from 23 to 32 weeks. They're usually unable to overcome the forces of gravity. Gravity is not their friend, okay? And gravity is sort of their enemy. And actually, they do not get midline orientation until about 36 weeks. And they do not have the capabilities of overcoming gravity until about 36 weeks as well. Up to 28 weeks, this infant is really completely hypotonic, and he lacks any type of physiologic flexion. So if we're going to take and we're going to put this infant in flexion, we are going to have to do it for him. We're going to have to take and flex. So, you know, remember that, because he has no interest in it. Extension is easy, and that's where you're going to find him all the time. At 32 weeks, you're going to find that this infant is going to have some hips and knees to begin to show some flexion, so while his arms are extended. So, you know, there are a lot of things taking place, a lot of things that we need to be aware of. So, you know, I think that, you know, as long as we're looking at timelines, we're going to be able to assist this infant in proper musculoskeletal growth and development. And remember, at 36 weeks, we have the infant that can get into flexion. You know, he maybe stretches out into extension. He's going to be able to bring it back into flexion, because, you know, you'll hear me say this time and time again. Extension is easy for these kids. Flexion is hard. Where we want them is in flexion. We want them midline, and we want them contained. Now, if we're looking at the musculoskeletal development, we're going to look at 3 things. We're going to look at how we're handling this infant. We're going to look at how we're positioning this infant. And we're going to look at what we can do as a caregiver to intervene and make this more positive. I want you to take, and when you're talking about handling and positioning, I think you need to take and look yourself in the eye and just say, okay, I need to look at admissions. I need to look at assessments. I need to look at exams. I need to look at transports. I need to look at weights. I need to look at bath time. I need to look at feedings. I need to look at kangaroo care. You know, I need to look at all of these things that we're doing in the unit, and how can we position and handle these infants much more appropriately and decrease the stress load with them. We're going to take and we're going to look at what inappropriate handling does for our infants. Number 1, it is going to cause our infants to have undue stress. It's going to help them to be unorganized. They may have some hypoxia. They may have increased intracranial pressure. They may have vestibular overstimulation. Remember Dr. Gorski's study, that when we talked about the fact of, you know, equilibrium and the sense of balance and so forth, about how many caregivers and how many times an infant was handled, and the fact that as adults, we would not tolerate this type of interaction. So therefore, we need to be very cognizant of the fact of what we are doing, how many times we're handling the infant, and of course, if we're doing it appropriately or inappropriately. Now remember, if we have a line that has become disconnected, if we have an infant that, you know, extubates themselves, if we have anything that creates a medical emergency, we are going to take care of that. Then we're going to work to bring this infant back together when that has subsided. We know that appropriate handling means we're going to do slow, gentle movements. We also know that it's going to provide this infant with some containment. We know that we're going to have a support network for this infant, so that if he does go into extension, he will meet slight resistance and he will come back into flexion. We need to, again, we need to look at unnecessary procedures or routines that, you know, really have no benefit to our infant. Look at co-bedding during that awake time, so that we can have some playtime and get to know our sibling. And then, of course, skin-to-skin kangaroo care is another way that we can create a more positive developmental handling process. Now, if we take and we look at this infant here, we've got great containment here, and we've got firm positive touch. Notice how those shoulders are rounded. Notice where his hands are. Notice the fact that, we have him contained, and we're also providing containment from a parent. And the fact that firm positive touch that we're giving this infant to let them know that we are there. We also want to take and sort of look at that intrauterine positioning, and I love the slides from Life because I think that they give us just a real true picture of what's happening. Notice that this infant is midline, he's physiologically flexed, and he's contained. Everything is right with the world on this picture here. And the fact this is something that we should try to mimic as much as we can, realizing that we, have ventilated patients, we have IVs, we have PICC lines, we have pulse oximeters, we've got all of this ancillary, work going on that we have to take into control and to maintain that midline, physiologically flexed, contained position. Some days it's not easy to do that. But, we need to take and look and see what we can do to give them as much of this as we can. If you take it, I love this picture. Notice how this infant is foot bracing and the fact he's going to be pushing away and then he's going to get that positive feedback to come back. So, they really, are familiar with that extension and that feedback of coming back. That's why when we're taking and working with our infant that we provide him boundaries, that we provide him a support network, one that mimics the intrauterine environment as much as he can so that he's getting that same input so the musculoskeletal system can grow and develop as it would have had this infant been able to stay in utero to the appropriate 39 to 40 weeks. Now, we want to take into account, and I'm not an occupational therapist or a physical therapist, but there is one really great principle that I have learned to appreciate, and that is the principle of activity-dependent development. And the thing about that is the fact it's that use it or lose it framework, all right? And the fact that if you don't use something for a while, what happens? You lose it. All right, so that intrauterine environment is constantly giving input on midline, physiologic flexion, containment, giving him all of that input. Okay, what happens when he gets to us? We may not have any boundaries, okay? He has, and he's still got active extension, but he may not have any reinforcement to return to flexion and to midline. So what do we have to do? We have to provide it to him because of the simple reason we really want him to establish good growth and development patterns because we said right in the very beginning, our infant is moldable. We have the ability to help him have good, muscular skeletal development. If we take and we look at this shot here, which, says, a million words, and the fact we've got that infant that's in utero, okay, and as we move, notice the fact that in utero he has underdeveloped flexor tone, really, he does, because everything is being there for him and he is being given reinforcements to come back. So when he gets to us, okay, and he has a little, has that absence of that skeletal structure really being defined, he comes to us. Look at this infant. Where are his legs? Knees are pointed east to west, right? Not north to south. Where are his arms? He's in total extension, totally out of control, has no boundaries, is getting no positive feedback. Gravity at this particular point in time is his enemy and is not his friend. We need to take and set goals for ourselves, goals for the unit, goals for, how we're going to maintain good musculoskeletal development. And that one of those is the fact with proper positioning, supportive positioning, developmentally supportive positioning, whatever we want to call it, we want to make it where it is appropriate for this infant. So what do we need to do? We need to maintain that proper body alignment, which means we need midline, we need that midline orientation, we need flexion, and we need containment. But we also need to prepare for that ongoing development and giving him fewer boundaries, giving him boundaries that he can work towards. We need to provide him with some security. We need to provide him with that hands-on containment sometimes, just for helping him to calm. We need to give him his hands to face. We may need to give him that pacifier for non-nutritive sucking. All of those things are going to help to contribute to self-soothing and helping him to calm, helping him to become more organized. And all of these will bring about rest. And we really want to continue to promote undisturbed sleep and rest.